Hi everybody, this is Karen Paul from Karen Paul Studio. I wanted to show you these gorgeous flowers that I'm going to be working from as my subject. I have a variety of different colors and textures, varieties of flowers that will be our subject. And so I'll be working from live flowers today. And also keep in mind that if you are working from something like flowers that wilts, then might be a good idea to take a few backup photographs. So you might need those for finishing off your painting if you don't get it done in the one sitting. And right in front of me I have two water jars. I have a variety of different round tip brushes, anywhere from say a size 1 through a size 10 for this project. I'm working on hot press paper. It's an Arches block. I recommend either using the hot press. That's great for getting very delicate washes, or most of the time I work from cold press. Any of those are really good papers, and just a variety of colors. This is a limited palette of around say 20 colors that I use most of the time in the studio. So what we're going to do is dive in today. I'm going to very loosely sketch out the subject. I'm going to show you that in just a minute. And we are going to be doing a method called Watercolor Quick Sketch. Later on in the workshop I'll be showing you how to do much more finished paintings, but for today I just want to show you some great tips for diving in and making some beautiful quick portraits of flowers. Okay, so I have here a 2H pencil, and I'm going to start sketching in a little outline here for one of these irises. Now, you may not be able to see these pencil lines because a 2H pencil is really great because you do not want the pencil lines to show up. You just want a barely visible line. And I'm just doing really quick outline because I'm probably going to change this up a little bit once we start getting into the painting. It just basically gives you a little bit of a roadmap so you know where you're going. So here we have the blue iris, and I'm ready to start painting. I'm using a number 8 sable brush. It's a Da Vinci. It's a great brush, kind of medium sized. First color that we're going to mix is cobalt blue, and I'm mixing it with lots of water because I really do want that initial wash to be really watery and really light. And what I'm going to do now is just start using that point of the brush just to pull the paint down into the shape. You can see I've got quite a lot of water on there. I did not wet the paper before I started. And then I'm moving over to the other petal right in here, just shaping it. I'm always continually looking back at the subject because I really want to capture some of those interesting little nuances, just the way that that petal curves in and out. Okay, so I'm taking a little bit more of a wash. You can see over here another petal, slightly different shape, going a different direction. And I sort of feel like when I'm doing this quick sketch method that it's almost like I'm very loosely interpreting the subject. I'm drawing with my brush. It's a really fun way of experimenting with watercolor techniques, is to do these quick little sketches. And you can be loose and interpretive, you can be more creative with it. Sometimes what I'll do is, say if I'm going to do a painting of the big blue iris, I might start out doing a quick little sketch like this, just to kind of get to know my painting. Maybe this takes me 15-20 minutes to do one of these at the most. And then that helps me when I'm doing maybe a more refined, larger painting, just kind of understand what techniques I'm going to be using and really to explore the subject. Now you can see I pull some of this paint down in here, right in here. So why this wash in here is still really wet, I'm going to mix up some ultramarine blue and grab some magenta. Any kind of pink you can use on your palette. Magenta, quinacridone rose, any of those are really good for making purples. So it's more of a reddish purple, and I want to introduce that into that wash and just allow, this is called wet into wet, when you allow two different colors to flow together. Put a little bit more cobalt blue in that, and then because this is wet, then the two colors will actually blend on the paper. Instead of mixing them on your palette, you can mix it on the paper, which is just another option for working with watercolor that is just so fun. Because sometimes you don't know quite what you're going to get. So there's that kind of spontaneity that you'll see emerge in your work. Kind of like happy little accidents. There we go. Right in here. And notice how I'm just putting these quick little strokes in there. I'm not messing with it too much because I want the water to do a lot of that work for me. Over here. Just pulling some of that paint down. And then I'm also just making sure that I get kind of like little curvy serrated edge on there, because that's exactly what I'm seeing on the live flower. So we're going to let that sort of sit for a while, and then I'm going to take more cobalt blue, mixing more water, and I do see that there's this other petal. You can see that I've actually switched to a smaller brush. So right in here, just pulling that down. Like in here, down in here. And over here. I've left a little space because that's where we're going to be adding in some of the yellow that we see, these interesting little markings that you're going to see on irises. The next stage is going to add some green underneath here for the stem. And you'll notice how I left a little white space between the base of the iris petal because I didn't want the green to flow too much into that area. And just pulling some of that paint down to create this green stem. I'm using cobalt green to create the stem, and I mixed just a little tiny bit of Payne's grey, actually sepia, which is a dark brown, into it just to make that more of an organic looking green. I like to mix my greens. I don't like to use colours that come just out of the tube because I feel like you get much more interesting greens when you do that. So there's a little stem in here. Okay, so this is what I would call the first layer, and I am going to take some lemon yellow, mixing it with a tiny bit of Indian yellow to warm it up, and because this is dry in this area, I'm going to put some of those markings in. You can always wait till it dries off too when you're painting, and go work on something else in the painting and then come back in and add a little bit more of those details. So while this is drying, we're going to now create another flower over here just for fun, and I'm thinking about this gorgeous little tulip. See how I'm just really sketching this in fast, putting some of those back petals in, sort of like a triangular shape, and sketching in the stem, and then we also want to put some petals. I'll go ahead now and take my larger brush, and there we have some permanent rose. That's going to be the very first color that I put down, and it's going to be the same technique where you take the very watery mix, one of your larger brushes, and you just start filling that shape in. And I'm coming back in now, behind there. Just want to get an initial layer down. I did not wet the paper. Then I'm going to take a smaller brush, and I'm going to wipe it off so it only has clear water, and it's actually a pretty dry brush, and I'm going to push up against the bottom because I'm actually lifting out some of that wash so that we get this little area right under the tulip that's lighter. And I'm also going to use the corner of my paper towel to go ahead and lift that out, because underneath tulips sometimes you'll see a little bit of a hint of yellow or even green. And then we're going to mix up some lemon yellow and add that to the cobalt green, and that's how we're going to create a stem, just using this brush here. This is about a number 5 or 6 round tip brush. It's a little bit smaller, and just going to pull that down and making a curved stroke, slight curve there. Now I'm going to reach for my larger brush using some cobalt green. Nice watery mix. This is just the first layer. First layer is always going to be light, and we can come back in and darken things up and create some darker values later. There it is. It's beautiful little curvy. I love these leaves on tulips, and I'm going to use the point of the brush to just shape that. I want to show you what I like to do with leaves, and that is, while that wash is still fairly wet, you can go ahead and introduce just a wee bit of color. So right in there some lemon yellow, and then let's grab a little bit of our phthalo green, take some cobalt, mix those two colors together, and right in here, while this wash is still wet, I'm just applying a different color. So once again, we get those two colors merging together right on the paper, wet into wet. And then right over here, I'm just going to also add a tiny bit of darker color so the stem looks a little bit more three-dimensional. So this is all I'm going to do on the first layer. I'm going to come back and work on this in just a moment, but before I do that, I am going to take the corner of my paper towel, and right on the very tip of this tulip, I'm going to lift out some color right in here, just so it's a little bit lighter. And I'm also going to use the back of my brush, because you'll notice sometimes tulips have these little lines, and this is a way of creating a soft line right there. So very first layer. Now we are going to come back now and do a little bit more detail on our tulip, on our iris. Going for some dioxazine purple mixed with cobalt blue. And right in here, we're going to add in the dark crevice that we do see, and use just a little bit of water, clear water, on the brush so that that just begins to merge into the other layers. So this is the beginning of building up a little bit more of the darker layers. I'm also seeing there's a back petal that is much, much darker than the ones in the front, and so I'm going to paint that in behind the petal that is in the front. You can see it is bleeding a little bit, and that's good because we want some of the layers to merge together, but this is almost dry. And I'm going to pull some of this color up in here and do the same thing, just create a little bit of a darker value. You can also rinse your brush off and put a tiny bit of moisture on there, so there's no paint, just a little tiny bit of water, and then I like to just drag that along the edge, and that will help soften that layer of paint, the darker layer of paint that I just put down. And this is so important for when you're creating these soft layers on flowers because you don't want to have a lot of harsh lines when you're creating the form. I did the same thing on that wash I put down. I just made sure that I could blend everything together. Same thing on here. I'm just pulling that paint up, just a wee bit of water. A bit of water along that edge. Now we can start adding some darker color to this green mix. I have cobalt green here, and I also mixed a little bit of phthalo green with it. I'm going to add a little bit of purple, just a tiny bit, because that's going to darken it. And I also want to get more of a three-dimensional quality to the stem. And so the way to do that is to add in that darker value. And you can see how I place this down, but it's going to drive the sharp edge. So you want to use clear water, only clear water on the end of your brush, and pull it down. And what that does is it helps that darker layer blend into the previous layer underneath. So important when you're painting flowers. Also, there's a little crevice in here, and I can see that there's a little bit of darker value here on the side. So same thing again, just using clear water so everything merges together. Now, I'm going to take a wee bit of lemon yellow with the same green mix and just go ahead and touch right along that edge, because irises often have a little bit of a green edge right underneath them. And that's what's so great about working from life, is you get to look at your subject very closely. And sometimes when you work with a photograph, you don't always see those things. So that's why I love to have things that are live in my studio, whether it be flowers or if it's a still life. I like to be able to look at that texture and observe the subtle color variations and value changes that don't often happen when you only work from photographs exclusively. There you go, just shaping that right there. So as I'm going, I'm also adjusting things, adding in value changes, blending.